Good evening, and thank you for your patience. My name is Tim Andrews, and thank you for joining us for this live interactive telephone town hall with Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman of New Jersey's 12th Congressional District. This is an interactive telephone town hall to discuss the state of the economy. So if you have a question you would like to ask during the program for our panel, please press *3 to enter the queue to speak with one of our conference specialists. If you're joining us online, you can simply type your name and question right below the streaming player. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live tonight, welcome. And if you would like to ask a question, please visit watsoncoleman.house.gov/live. And again, just type your name and question right below the streaming player. We will also have a few poll questions for you this evening and would appreciate your participation and your feedback. But now, please welcome the very busy Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman. Congresswoman?
Thanks, Tim. Good evening, everyone. Let me first apologize for the delay. I was in appropriations today. We thought it was going to be an easy committee meeting, but it turned into quite something to do. So I thank you. I thank you for your patience. I thank you for wanting to be a part of this. And I thank you so much for joining this Teletown hall on the state of our nation's economy. I'm holding this town hall to answer questions that you may have about legislation and how it will impact you. I'm doing this as a way to keep our work in Congress as transparent and as plain as possible. Everyone is affected in some way by this process. I hope that our town hall this evening provides you with clarity and an opportunity to get your important questions answered. Over the last 2.5 years, as we climbed out of the economic crisis caused by the COVID pandemic, our country has added 13 million jobs. That's 13 million jobs. The unemployment number has dropped and has been under 4% for 16 months in a row. During this recovery process, inflation did spike, hitting working families especially hard. This was a result of a number of combining factors, including the extended time it took to get our supply chains back to full speed and meet the demand of consumers who were going back to work, and some identified cases of price gouging that we heard about by industries that have consolidated in recent decades, and some which just continue to be greedy. That said, the annual inflation rate has fallen 10 months in a row, and it's now down 40% since last November. So the economy is on its way back, and I'm working with my colleagues to ensure that everyone benefits from the economic growth, that no one gets left behind. Over the last week leading up to the vote on the debt ceiling, my office received input from those of you across the 12th District, worried about our country defaulting while also voicing your concerns about the entire debt ceiling process. And I just want to say that raising the debts, it is our duty to pay the debts already accrued by the federal government, just like we have to do as individuals who've incurred debt. Since 1960, Congress has raised or temporarily extended the debt limit 78 times, 49 times under Republican presidents and 29 times under Democratic presidents. In recent years, Republicans have insisted on a dine and dash policy. It's a policy in which they run up debts on the things that they want, like the tax cuts and the giveaways for the ultra-rich, and then refuse to pay the bill, demanding we cut essential services that are designed to help people, even their own constituents, whom they don't seem to really care for. This year, in return for not forcing a default, Republicans demanded cuts to federal programs that support millions of Americans with the ultimate aim of taking food out of the mouths of those struggling to make ends meet. If they didn't get the cuts they wanted, they warned that they crashed the global economy, harming all but the most wealthy Americans. Despite all this, our President Biden, and his negotiators fought off the worst, most egregious demands of the Republicans, including the across-the-board 22% cuts to important programs that the president was able to block. Threats to Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, veterans' health care, and historic infrastructure and climate investments were all thwarted. Instead, President Biden was able to extend federal assistance to the homeless, to veterans, and to young people aging out of the foster care system. The increase to the Department of Defense already bloated budget that it has is lower than it would likely have otherwise turned out if we had approached it from a different perspective. So I voted in favor of this legislation, as I believe the responsible course of action to avoid the economic devastation that would follow should we allow the country to default. But now that this process is over, our country must have a conversation about eliminating the debt ceiling entirely. And we must also reflect on what impact this legislation and other bills have on our neighbors and our communities right here in New Jersey. So joining me today to talk about the debt ceiling and other issues is the brilliant Brandon McKoy, the Vice President for State Partnerships and a co-leader of the State Fiscal Policy Division at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. We also have our moderator, Tim, who's going to be helping with the technical side of things. As I mentioned, this is an opportunity for us to answer questions that you may have. Members of my staff will be taking your calls so that you can ask questions to our panel throughout the program. So welcome to everyone.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And before you introduce our first guest or our guest this evening to discuss the economy and answer constituent questions with you, we would like to let those of you joining us on the phone or online, if you would like to sign up for the Congresswoman's newsletter to stay up to date with your 12th Congressional Office, please dial 1 right now. If you dial 1, we'll collect your email and make sure that you get into that e-newsletter and stay up to date with the office. But with that said, Congresswoman, please introduce your first guest.
Thanks, Tim. I'm certainly delighted to bring Brandon McKoy on to share with us his thoughts, his assessments, and his ideas. I wanted to say, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your patience and waiting for me to get out of the appropriations meetings. So let us get right into it. Brandon, what is your take on the debt ceiling process? How would a default have impacted everyday people in our state and truly across the nation? It's good to see you, Brandon.
Very good to see you, Congresswoman, and no worries. I know today has been quite a day, so I appreciate any time I get to spend with you. But for sure, New Jersey, across the country, across the world, to be honest with you, I mean, it's clear that a default would have been incredibly harmful for everybody in the country, but most especially and particularly low-paid workers, families with low incomes, and, some specificity around that. 65 million Social Security beneficiaries would have seen or could have seen their benefits delayed. 6 million veterans and their survivors could have had their benefits held up. Families could have seen their monthly rental assistance or childcare assistance delayed. And so, in many respects, it was imperative to avoid default, of course. And, regarding the process itself, I think it goes without saying, it's just very frustrating that we've gotten to this place where the worldwide economy is essentially being sacrificed so that some lawmakers can advance ideological policies that are going to limit domestic spending and implement work requirements that would make programs like SNAP and TANF less effective. Just really ideological policy ideas that we know don't work. And so given that we're essentially the only country and major economy for the most part with this sort of mechanism, and with it continuing to be sort of abused and misused in very clear ways, I think there's some growing support for maybe trying something else or doing away with it altogether.
Thanks, Brandon. I was actually in appropriations meeting today on the agricultural bill, and we talked about the fact that domestic spending is sort of like under the curse right now. And so we're talking about SNAP, and we're talking about school lunches, and we're talking about aid to poor farmers. We're talking about everyday working families and those who can't work, but supporting them to meet their needs. So it's really significant that we should be having this conversation after I got out of that long meeting this morning, went from 10 a.m. just now, actually. So I thank you. Tim, I think that you, well, no, let me ask Brandon, if I might, one more question, because I want to ask everyone a question that's listening in on their take on this topic. Brandon, we've got this poll question for everyone now. Do you think that in the future, the debt ceiling should be raised as needed annually, or should it be abolished completely? So press 1 for as needed, press 2 for annually, and press 3 for abolished completely.
And again, that's a poll question that you can respond to if you're joining us online. You can simply, right below the streaming player, you'll be able to see that poll question. And if you're joining us via telephone, again, do you think that in the future the debt ceiling should be raised as needed annually or abolished completely? Press 1 for as needed, press 2 for annually, or press 3 for abolished completely. And I know, Congresswoman, you have more questions for your guests, so please go right ahead.
Thanks, Tim. I mean, I'm interested in their perspective on certain legislation. I'd like to know what legislation from the last 2 years would you say has most positively impacted the residents of New Jersey, especially those who have been historically underserved. And I actually would very much love to hear Brandon respond to that.
Yeah, certainly. So a lot of this, of course, doesn't only apply to New Jersey, but there's been major benefits to communities in our state on things from policies like the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 that provided significant eviction relief during an important time, support for childcare, expanded the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, which are massively successful at driving down poverty. And we saw the implementation of the child tax credit. It cut child poverty in half, and drove it down to historic levels, which is incredible and a big reason why we need to reinstate it. And there was also a lot of positive from just general COVID relief funds, like increased SNAP provisions for food stamps for hungry families and kids, Medicaid protections. And then I think something that really goes underappreciated is just the significant amount of state and local government relief that allowed state governments and municipalities to avoid really harmful cuts to services and staffing. And that was a big, big pain point of the 2008 recession, the Great Recession, and state and local governments, making massive cuts that we've honestly never really fully recovered from. And so it was good to see that we learned that lesson. And in this crisis with COVID, federal government was providing more support to prevent that from happening. But coming down the pike, we're about to see major implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act and provisions there. Already providing support to reduce the price of prescriptions, and there's a historic amount of investments in tackling climate change and helping us grapple with severe weather events, and that's obviously on everyone's mind recently, given the almost apocalyptic scenes last week with smoke from the Canada wildfires enveloping New York and New Jersey. And so those climate provisions, if they are utilized well by the state, could help a whole lot of communities do things to address their sewer and water systems, build green and clean energy production facilities, help homeowners and renters weatherize, make their homeowners, help homes more energy efficient. So there's a lot of excitement about all that's to come on that front. But state governments really need to do a very good job of understanding that federal relief is coming to an end. A lot of the money that they felt they were quote unquote flush with cash was not structural. It was not theirs. It was federal support. And so states need to start making sure that they are budgeting in a fashion that accounts for that, and that they can continue to invest in programs and assets that help everybody to succeed.
Yeah, and I think that we need to remind them that one of the reasons we have low unemployment is because jobs were generated through the bipartisan infrastructure program. And of course, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to have a tremendous impact on both our climate, our future, our jobs, and just our well being. Tim, I think we have another poll question that either you want to present or I will present it. Up to you. I
I
guess
will
Tim is.
present that. Yes, ma'am. I will present
All
that in
right.
just a minute. I just wanted to remind folks that if you're joining us on the telephone and you'd like to ask a question this evening, we have a lot of questions coming in already about the state of the economy. Please press *3 on your telephone keypad right now. That'll get you in line to ask a question live. Or if you're joining us online, you can simply type your name and question right below the streaming player. And Congresswoman, if you don't mind, before we get to that poll question, we have so many questions coming in. Are you ready to take our first caller this evening?
Yeah, I think Brandon and I are ready to handle something.
All right, that sounds good. We have Aaron on the line right now. Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for holding. Thanks for your patience this evening. And you are live with the Congresswoman and with Brandon McKoy.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for taking my question. I actually had a question related to the unemployment. So as somebody who has personally experienced it myself this year, and I also have friends across the country facing the same situation, we keep hearing that the unemployment is low, but as professionals looking for work, we're really not feeling it. We can send out tons and tons of resumes and not even get initial screening interviews or any contact whatsoever from companies. So it's taking months to find work. And personally, I'm a supply chain professional, so that was kind of really unexpected for me. Do you have any insights as to what might be going on? Did we change the metric for unemployment in the last few years, or do you have any insight?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm actually kind of surprised to hear this from you, particularly given the stated field that you're in, because one of the issues we were having was a disruption to the supply chain as it was relating to getting things on board that we needed. Well, we have a number of bills that would address guaranteed jobs, guaranteed incomes, things of that nature. We believe that the Inflationary Reduction Act, as well as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, will generate greater jobs, more opportunities for people. We believe that the things that we're trying to do with trade agreements with other countries will impact more jobs at every level being created here in the United States of America and accessible to those, because that President Biden and even Steny Hoyer, who was the former whip, always kept saying, make it in America, make it in America. We can manufacture it in America. And there is this commitment to make things in America. And in the very near future, the CHIPS Act should be coming online, although slowly, how government works. And hopefully that opens up opportunities for professionals as well as those who have technical backgrounds and specialties. Tim, you have another question?
No, she's good, and I appreciate the answer on that. And we have so many questions coming in, both live and online this evening, and great results already with the poll question as well. Let's go with Lauren in Pennington. Hi, Lauren. You're live with the Congresswoman. Thank you for holding. And what's your question this evening?
Yeah, I have a question about, did we always have a debt ceiling? And if not, what caused it to change? And if we go back to not having it, if we didn't have one, what are the consequences of not having one?
Well, first of all, the consequences of not having to deal with this and negotiate it means that we recognize that we've incurred this debt that we have to pay, that the full faith and credit of the United States is on the line should we default in not paying. And in so doing, we would disrupt the economy, not only in our country, but all over the world. But let me just tell you that the debt ceiling issue has been in place since like World War I. And it was a response to the president needing to be able to raise the debt during the World War I time when members of Congress weren't as accessible. Well, now we're accessible. We're accessible on our cell phone, on our iPad, on our laptop, on every other device that you can, including our telephones. And we can be there lickety split if we have to. So yeah, there's always been debt. There's been a debt ceiling consideration since World War I. I think I spoke to the number of times we've addressed this under both Republican and Democratic presidents. We've actually had threats before in terms of give us what we want, or we'll shut government down. That's not been that's taken to my knowledge, but it is threats that have been made by Republicans from time to time. But this was a particularly stressful one because we were dealing with a lot of folks who were thinking more ideologically and less logically about this country in general. And Brandon, whenever you want to, contribute, please just feel free to jump in.
Oh, you're covering it super well. The only thing I would say is, just reaffirming and doing a plus one on the fact that the debt ceiling does not increase our debt deficits. It's a legal mechanism to pay our bills. It's just very frustrating to see it turned into sort of this tool to force implementation of, like we said earlier, really sort of aggressive policy proposals and to move things like big tax cuts for the wealthy and expanding, more the Trump tax cuts from previously. That's absolutely going to worsen our fiscal situation and undermine the ability of our departments to do their jobs, especially, honestly, the IRS, which has a significant role to play with regards to fairly administering the tax code, making sure people pay what they owe, and making sure that we can have a healthy fiscal situation for our country.
Thanks. I think it's really significant that you raised that whole issue about the IRS, because one of the things that we were proposing as Democrats and the president was to increase the IRS agency's staffing so that it could spend more time going after those that represented 1% of the population, but like 80 or 90% of the wealth. And they're the ones that are withholding hundreds of billions of dollars in their taxes. And so Republicans were hell-bent on trying to destroy that completely. We did have to give in on that particular issue, but the president held forth that we have some capacity to do better with the IRS and both looking at the 1%, but also being better at their customer services.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Absolutely.
By the way,
I just want to affirm the Congresswoman's point there, and yeah.
No, go ahead, Brandon.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I just want to confirm the Congresswoman's point on the IRS in particular, because there's a lot that gets said about that agency, and there's a lot of misinformation that runs rampant about that agency. But the cuts are going to be harmful to the IRS and its ability to do the things that we want to do. It can still do those things. I think it's important to say that IRS can still do things like improve customer service, make sure that it is auditing who needs to be audited, but the cuts will mean that the funding for that runs out sooner, right? But we need the IRS fulfilling these goals and helping implement a more just and equitable tax code. And restoring the cuts is something that hopefully some people maybe on the Appropriations Committee could take on when the time comes.
So let me just say something about the Republicans and their desire to give tax breaks to the very, very wealthy, because Brandon, you touched upon that in terms of its impact on bills that we've already incurred and needed to pay with the very, very generous tax cut that the Trump administration gave to those who are very, very wealthy. We need you all to pay attention, because Republicans are, again, even at the time when they're trying to take food out of the mouth of babes and mothers and reduce domestic spending and mess around with things like Social Security, they're still looking to make even more tax advantages available to those who are very, very wealthy. And we must make sure that we have the kind of outside advocacy to work with us, we'll be trying to stop that internally. I also think I need you to know that we think that Social Security is sacred. It means that there is a floor beneath which no family will have to live. It's a guarantee. And we are very much, I'm very much in lockstep with John Larson in trying to increase Social Security, because I think that it's not kept up with inflation, that we really need to be more realistic on who's paying and how much they're paying in Social Security on their millions and millions of dollars of income.
Congresswoman, this is obviously a very important topic this evening, as we have thousands literally joining us tonight for this live telephone town hall. And to all of you who have joined us via telephone, we appreciate your participation. And if you'd like to ask a question, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad. And if you're joining us online, you can simply type your name and question right below the streaming player, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can this evening. I would like to give you the results of our second poll this evening. The question was, do you think that in the future the debt ceiling should be raised as needed, annually, or abolished completely? And the results are in. 51% responded as needed, only 12% annually, and 37% believe that it should be abolished completely. And we have more poll questions for you this evening, and we would appreciate your participation. Your feedback is very important. So for everybody listening right now, our next poll question this evening: do you think that the federal government should spend more equally on defense and non-defense activities? For context, the U.S. spends more on defense alone than the next 10 countries combined. Non-defense discretionary spending includes things such as infrastructure, education, transportation, veterans health care, and homeland security. So the question is, do you think the federal government's non-defense spending should be more, equal to, or less than defense spending? Press 1 for non-defense spending should be, non-defense spending should exceed defense spending. Press number 1. Press number 2 if you believe that non-defense and defense spending should be about equal, and press 3 if you believe that defense spending should continue to exceed non-defense spending. And we'll have the results of that poll coming up in just a few minutes. But right now, let's go back to Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman. Congresswoman?
Thanks, Tim, as we're collecting that really important information, because it does inform us in the 12th Congressional District what our priorities are. I really want to get to another question with Brandon. And it's about the Inflation Reduction Act, because within that act, there were investments to lower energy costs and accelerate investments in clean energy and shore up supply chains, among other things. It also included $80 billion for the IRS, as we mentioned before, which would help replace retiring agents and give them the resources to go after wealthy tax frauds. Republicans have demanded those cuts to the IRS. The president succeeded in holding out and not having to give up entirely on those cuts. But we do have an issue with that, and we do have a challenge for IRS to be able to get at that $160 billion that are owed in taxes by the 1% who are the very, very, very wealthy. The debt ceiling cut it by 0.25%. So what do you think, what would you advise Congress to do to undo the damage that was caused by that cut, Brandon?
Well, like I said before, and I think it's important to appreciate, again, the IRS can do some of this, but the money will run out sooner for them to do it. And so that's going to be a challenge. But like you said, this is important funding for things like improving customer service, answering phones, auditing the folks that, haven't been audited in a very long time and need to be in order to pay what they owe. And even, just making the process of filing taxes more customer friendly and convenient. Just so many countries where you don't have to go to a company to file your taxes. There's a tool, it's free. And I think just last week, the IRS or Treasury had announced some tool that the IRS is working on to do that here. And so those are the types of things that can happen when we fully fund the IRS to fulfill their role in our government. And so the debt ceiling cut of a quarter of their funding is definitely unwelcome. And for folks who want to claim that they care about debts and deficits and making sure that we are being efficient and implementing budgets that are equitable, well, you don't do that if you don't make sure that the IRS has the tools and resources it needs to do its job. And so it's a bit of talking out of both sides of one's mouth to say those things and then now cut the funding for a very important agency that has a major role to make sure that's possible. So I think for the committees that you're on, that your colleagues are on, and just in general, folks making it a nonstop priority, bringing it up as much as possible, and appreciating what it would mean for the IRS to be able to actually do its job and help us to actually raise revenues in a way that we can invest in transportation, in green energy, and education, and so many things that make this country stronger.
Thank you, Brandon. And now, I'd like to direct a question to our listeners. I'm going to start the question and I'm going to let Tim tell you how to respond to it. I get a chance to speak on the floor. I get a chance to speak in committees, and I get a chance to advance both letters of priorities and to both the White House and to our committees in Congress and in the U.S. Senate. I'd like to know from you, what issues do you think are most important for Congress to address this year? And what issues do you want to see me speak on the floor about? And Tim, we have a number of issues.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to explain to our listeners what they are and how they can be heard on any particular priority?
Well, again, this is another poll question where it's very important to get your feedback. It lets the Congresswoman know what's important to you, which means that's what's important to her. So again, what issues do you think are most important for Congress to address this year? And what issues do you want to see your Congresswoman, Bonnie Watson Coleman, speak on the House floor about? For income inequality, press 1. For the environment and climate change, press 2. For gun violence, press 3. And for a fair tax system, press 4. Or if you have other issues that are important to you, press 5. And again, your participation in these polls is so important. And your calls and your online questions are also very important. And I would just like to say that we appreciate all the calls that are coming in this evening, all of you that are joining us live. And Congresswoman, our next question, actually, Ms. Bertha from Ewing has several questions for you. Hi, Ms. Bertha. Thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Certainly
ma'am.
can.
Okay. Thank you, Congress.
Thank you, Ms. Bertha, for being on. I think I just lost you.
Oh, okay.
No, you're
There you go.
You go right ahead, Bertha.
You can hear
There
me?
you go. Yep.
Okay. So one of my questions deals with the reduction of the cost of insulin that President Biden was able to successfully push through recently. So I wanted to know if that type of thought process is going to go into other drugs as well to try to bring the cost down of other medications as well.
Yes, ma'am. We're trying very hard to pursue that so that Medicare can negotiate with drug companies the cost of medications that are available to consumers. We're working on that. Some of it, is going to move more easily than others, but it is our overall intent to ensure that those who need medication can afford it. And we know that there are times when people have to make some really tough decisions about, do I buy medication? Do I buy food? Do I send my kid to school?
Right.
Do I put gas in the car? We're very mindful of that. The Inflation Reduction Act recognizes that. We knew that insulin was something that was a big, big, big issue with a great percentage of our people in our country, and we started there. But it is our desire to expand those offerings to other medications, particularly for things that we see commonly affect people, like blood pressure and things of that nature, and particularly things that affect people with lower incomes. So yes, ma'am, that is part of our forward agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Bertha. Thank you for your question, and thank you, Congresswoman. Let's take another one. We have Karen Johnson on the line. Hi, Karen. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Congresswoman Coleman. My question has to do with mental health services. Working in behavioral health, I know that the accessibility can be limiting for a lot of people. And funding for those services also are not where it should be at this time. And I just wanted to know, is there anything in Congress right now that is where the discussion is happening around making more funding available?
Yeah. Thanks for asking that question. So in 2019, I led a special task force, an emergency task force on mental health and suicide among young Black youth, because I had opened up my Facebook page every day, and there was a story about a youth, 5, 10, 12, 13 years old, trying to commit suicide, succeeding in committing suicide, or thinking about suicide. So we convened this task force, and we had a working group of professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, et cetera, working with us. And we held a number of hearings across the spectrum, trying to reach out to the LGBT community, young Black community, women, boys, you name it. As a result of that work, there was a report that went out sounding the alarm. As a result of that report, which captured what was missing, what was needed, and where we needed to go, we crafted a piece of legislation pursuing equity in mental health. It is a bill that has $995 million worth of resource allocations for things like more mental health care workers that are minority, come from the minority community, because we found out that less than 3% of the psychiatrists and psychologists were people of color. Money to support a minority program in college, fellowship program, like $500 million or something to that extent went into that program. We also have within that legislation and pieces of legislation that we're actually having considered on the floor, opportunities to expand healthcare in the communities, dealing with our faith-based communities, getting them engaged in educating and seeing, helping out with when they see the signs of issues. Money that would go into schools to put more mental health professionals in the schools. Let us not be overrun all the time with resource officers. Training that would be for teachers and administrators so that they could understand that a kid acting out isn't necessarily an uncontrollable kid. It may be one who's experiencing trauma, and we need to see it for what it is. And the same thing with adults. We recognize that there have been issues with a lack of access to healthcare. We've been putting money into telehealth so that during the pandemic, we found that that was something that worked. We're trying very hard to make sure that that is a service that still is available. And at the same time, trying to equip doctors and doctors' offices and hospitals with the resources that they need to have mental health professionals available. And one last thing is that we're very concerned about supporting our law enforcement so that they will have access to mental health professionals to go out into communities when they're faced with someone who's having an episode at that moment, and it's a mental health episode. It is not one that requires, some draconian response that could end up with someone losing their life. So those are some of the things that we're doing, some of the things that we have initiated already. And I'll tell you that it was a subject matter that wasn't discussed much before 2019. But since we started this discussion, it has expanded to different platforms, and it has expanded even out into looking at reforming our drug policies and the relationship between our drug policies and mental health.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And we're getting great response from our polls this evening. I'd like to give you results of our third poll this evening. The question was, do you think the federal government's non-defense spending should be more, equal to, or less than defense spending? The results are in. 44% said non-defense and defense spending should be about equal. 41% said non-defense spending should exceed defense spending, and 15% responded defense spending should continue to exceed non-defense spending. And again, we appreciate your participation in these polls. Our latest poll question that is up for you, if you'd like to participate, either online by right below the streaming player, you can just type in your answer, or if you're joining us via telephone, here's the question. What issues do you think are most important for Congress to address this year? And more specifically, what issues do you want to see Congresswoman Watson Coleman speak on the House floor about? Press 1 for income inequality. Press 2 for the environment or climate change. Press 3 for gun violence. Press 4 for a fair tax system. Or press 5 if you have other priorities that are important to you. And again, we appreciate your participation in these polls. It's so important to help direct the Congresswoman on the things that are important to you, which are important to her. Another call coming in, and again, if you have a question you'd like to ask, press *3 on your telephone keypad. If you're joining us online and would like to ask a question, simply type your name and question right below the streaming player. Also, if you would like to sign up for the Congresswoman's e-newsletter, simply press *6 right now, and we'll collect your email address and make sure that you get on that list. Right now, we have Julie Mira on the line. Hi, Julie. Thank you for holding. You're live with the Congresswoman. Hi, Julie. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Go right ahead.
My question to Bonnie Watson Coleman, my name is Julie Mira. I am a councilwoman for the borough of South River in your district. Lately, we've been having a lot of old infrastructure issues, and our town is failing with infrastructure, but nobody seems to know how to apply for the funding with the federal grant money. Is there a way or a process that we can go through you to be able to get federal funding?
So let me just tell you that there is money for infrastructure projects. Grants, guaranteed loans, low interest, no interest, all of the above. I need you to reach out to my office so that I can give you the various departments that can be responsive to your needs. And I can't tell you the websites now, but there's funding in the Environmental Protection Act. There's funding in Transportation and Housing and Development. There's the infrastructure bill that was passed. There's money in the Inflation Reduction Act for projects as well. There are multiple programs, multiple grant programs. Here's my challenge. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, I got to fight like the Dickens to make sure that Republicans will support us in funding those programs that have already passed, already been signed into law, already have money allocations associated with them, but we've got to stop them from reneging on their promises to this country. But if you, Julie, would, Councilwoman, just reach out to my office, reach out to 609-883-0026 and ask to speak to the district director, Jordan Lewis. He will make sure that he connects with us down here in Washington and that we can guide you in how to access some of these programs. Thank you for asking that question.
Congresswoman, I just want to also say, I know for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to have a ton of funds for infrastructure and sewer and water systems and whatnot. A lot of the final guidance on those things is being determined, I think, basically as we speak. And there are a whole lot of people thinking a lot about how we make sure that it is as easy as possible for communities, counties, states, governments to understand the process, to be able to apply, and to be able to make sure that those dollars are driving towards impact, and also especially for marginalized communities where there's a lot of higher infrastructure needs and modernization needs. And so I just want to say there's a whole lot of people thinking about this stuff because we definitely need to make sure that those funds work.
And at the end of the day, Councilwoman, there will be a state agency that you'll probably work through, but let us guide you through the various grant programs, where they originate, what departments they originate in, and what departments in state government will be your touch point.
And Congresswoman, if you could you give that phone number one more time, please?
609-883-0026.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Kathy from Hillsborough, who's been holding online. Hi, Kathy. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hello. Can you hear me?
No
Hi,
problem.
Kathy. I can hear you.
Okay. Hello, Congresswoman.
Hello there.
Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to ask about the status of student loan forgiveness. Someone in my family has tried over and over to get through school during COVID, and sometimes when there was a shutdown, had to take classes multiple times and continue to borrow money for student loans. And I saw a statistic tonight that 90% of the people that would receive student loan forgiveness earn $75,000 or less, and probably most of them earn even less than that. So I'm disappointed if it didn't, pass or it's been dropped in Congress, but I'm hoping to get some insights about the status of it right now.
So basically, the president has done this through his executive order power, and you are correct in the targeted population of being $75,000 earning families earning and less. And I believe it's like a $10,000 maximum, I think, payment, but let me check that. But it will probably target the majority of the debt, those who are at the lowest income levels are have right now. But Brandon, you might have some more specific information on that. So let me throw it to you.
Yeah.
I do know that the courts are trying to get involved. The Republicans continue to try to fight this initiative in the courts, but the president has been kind of determined that we're going to be able to give student debt relief.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah, so I think
Brandon?
I think the details on the program are so it's $10,000 of eligibility, but if folks receive the Pell Grant or a Pell student, that would be $20,000 in relief. And so, yes, it is currently, I think people are sort of waiting on pins and needles right now because the Supreme Court is expected to rule on that. And obviously that will have tremendous impact on the ability of the program to go forward. But that's basically the parameters.
So this is a discussion about what government can and should do for you. And if the Supreme Court determines that the president overreached his authority and puts a pause on this, that's another reason for us to get out here and vote and make sure that we have the kind of support that the president needs in the next Congress, to ensure that these issues that are of great concern to him for working families and families who even have trouble finding work are supported with the kind of resources that government is designed to provide.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you all of you who have been participating this evening for this very important live telephone town hall regarding the state of the economy, which I know is important to everyone. And I would also like to give you the results of our latest poll question. Congresswoman, the question was, what issues do you think are most important for Congress to address this year? And what issues do you want to see Congressman Watson Coleman speak about on the House floor? And overwhelmingly, the number one response was gun violence as the number one issue at 38%. Both income inequality and a fairer tax system both garnered about 17 to 18% of the results that came in. Thirdly, there were other issues that were important to the constituents that are not mentioned specifically, and then the environment and climate change came in with 13% of the results this evening. And again, if you had a question this evening that you wanted to ask, star 3 on your telephone keypad, or just typing it in right below the streaming player if you're joining us online. We've had so many participants this evening and so many questions, but not to worry. If we were not able to answer your specific question, we've been taking down the information as it comes in and recording that so we can get those answers back to you. And right now, let's go to Daniel from Somerset. Hi, Daniel. You're one of our last callers this evening.
Yes, hello. My question is not an economic one. My question is that I'm concerned with the fact that small groups of people can set policy in regard to which books can be read in schools and which books libraries can have. I think this is a violation of the First Amendment. Governor Pritzker in Illinois recently signed a bill eliminating book banning in his state. I'm wondering what is next on these people's agenda. Now, should New Jersey and or the federal government act similarly what Governor Pritzker did in Illinois? And I feel that if a parent is concerned what their children are reading, they should act by telling their children not to read certain books. But I don't think parents or small groups have the right to tell me what I allowed my children to be read.
You know, you're absolutely right, Daniel. Let me just say a couple of things about this. Number one, I think New Jersey's governor has already spoken out. There'll be no books banned in New Jersey. Whether or not he needs to put that in a law, you know, I really guess so, because you never know who's going to come and be the next governor. Book banning is un-American. Book banning is part of this hue and cry and sound the alarm to people about something that there's no need to be alarmed. It kind of goes like hand in hand with Republicans not wanting you to know about history, not wanting you to know about the legitimacy of Blacks and Latinos and Muslims and immigrants and members of the LGBTQ community. It's all about diminishing the value of those people. And the majority of the people are those people. And so I agree with you that we on the federal level and every state should protect and preserve the right for people to read whatever it is they want to read, to learn the full history of this country and the contributions and the values of everybody. And so you're talking to the choir when you talk to me about that. I agree with you 1000%. I would like to take a moment, if you don't mind, and talk about the whole issue of gun safety. because I knew that that was going to be the response, the number one response for the District 12. District 12 consists of communities that care so much for the safety and security of not only our children that go to school, but our families that go shopping or go to a movie or go to a concert. We know that the proliferation of guns is a big mistake in this country. We also believe that when the Constitution was written, it was about a militia and it was about muskets, and it was not about assault weapons, nor rapidly firing weapons, nor guns in the hands of everybody without our knowing who has them. And so we just signed a discharge petition this week for related to gun safety, advanced and more deep checks and balances about who has a gun, closing loopholes, eliminating assault weapons, you name it, we've tried to do it. I've got legislation that would only allow you to purchase ammunition online and have to say who you are and things of that nature, and be licensed and trained. So number one concern for all of us. You know, we've been on this call now, I guess, about an hour, and we got to say goodnight. And I'm sorry because I think we're just getting started and we need to do this more often. I thank you for the variety of questions. I want to give Brandon an opportunity to say goodnight before I finally close out. And Brandon, I'm so grateful for your participation.
Oh, no, I appreciate that very much, Congresswoman. You're my favorite, and I regret I don't live in your district anymore. But still appreciate all you're doing and all that you're raising and all that you're highlighting and supporting. And if there's anything you take away from my time this evening, please know that there's so much work to be done to make sure that we are fighting for federal, state, and local budgets that can actually make it possible to realize the communities that we all know we can and we need. And so that's definitely a major part of my work. And I know definitely a major priority of Congresswoman Watson Coleman, and just appreciate the time and always appreciate being with you.
Thanks, Ann. Thank you so much, Brandon. Hey, thank you, Tim. You did a marvelous job also as our moderator. If you could see my staff in the office, they're high-fiving everybody that we actually made this happen because I was so delayed in coming. I mean, they're like, thank God it's over. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. I so appreciate your time, your concern, your sharing of information. I assure you, we're singing from the same songbook when it comes to the priority of issues that we need to tackle. And I also know that as long as we stay engaged and committed, that we will make this the best district, the best state, and the best country for all of the people that find their way here. Thank you all, and God bless you. You know how to reach us. If you've got questions that didn't get answered, please refer them to 609-883-0026. That is the telephone number, or you can find me online. Just put Bonnie Watson Coleman at house.com, and you'll find me. Share with me. Thank you, and God bless. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you for all your hard work in Congress, and thank you to everyone who called in. We want to assure you, if you were not able to get your specific question asked, know that our staffers have recorded your question and will be reaching out to you directly to get an answer to you as soon as possible. Again, thanks for joining us. Have a great night. God bless.